I saw a news headline that a pop-up cafe in Australia was selling cookies for $17.50, but the cookies were stale. Today we'll review this article together so you can understand this story and so you can learn 78 expressions to sound fluent. Welcome back to JForrest English. Of course, I'm Jennifer. Now let's get started. Here's the headline that caught my eye. How a stale $17.50, and this represents Australian dollars. How a stale $17.50 cookie sparked a social media storm. These cookies look delicious, don't they? But what about this important adjective, stale? Do you know what this means? Stale means not fresh. It's an adjective. We use this specifically with food, but not all food. We really only use this with baked goods, such as cookies, bread, pastries, things like that. So if someone asks you, oh, do we have any bread, or do you have any bread? You could say, yeah, but it's stale. So you're letting the person know it's not very fresh. It's stale. The bread's stale. So this is an adjective that describes the bread, or in this case, the cookie. So how a stale $17.50 cookie. Do you notice anything about how I'm saying this? I'll say it again. Pay attention. $17.50 cookie. Are you surprised that I'm not saying 50 cents? 50 cents because there's more than 1 cent, but it's a $17.50 cookie. Now you can say $17.50 or $17.50. The and is optional, but you cannot add an S to dollar or cent because this functions as an adjective, and adjectives don't have a plural form. I wrote down how you would vocalize that, and remember, and is optional, so it's in parentheses. But if you say this cookie costs, which is a very common sentence structure, this cookie costs, you would add the S if it's more than $1 or more than 1 cent, because this is a noun phrase, so it exists in the singular and plural. So you would say this cookie costs $17 and is still optional, 50 cents. Let's keep going and look at sparked. So how a stale cookie sparked. This means caused. So the cookie sparked a social media storm. Now, what is a social media storm? Well, just think about the word storm and try to get an image of what happens when a storm happens. It can be very intense. It can happen suddenly, and most people associate it with something negative. So a social media storm is an intense, strong, negative reaction. So you can understand just from this headline that there's some controversy. Something happened with this $17 cookie, $17.50 cookie to be exact. So are you excited to learn about what happened? Are you excited to learn more vocabulary as well and improve your fluency? If you are, then put let's go in the comments so I know you're excited to continue. And don't worry about writing notes as we go because I summarize everything in a free lesson PDF. You can find the link in the description. Now let's continue on. Set against a backdrop of cliffside mansions. So these are mansions, very large houses on a cliffside, the side of a cliff. So cliffside is the adjective that describes the mansions. A backdrop of cliffside mansions. And then a backdrop means that it's in the background. So that would be the backdrop. When you look around you, you see these mansions, very large houses on the sides of cliffs. So that would be set against a backdrop. So you can just think of it as in the background, there are cliffside mansions. This is just a more poetic way of saying it. Set against a backdrop of cliffside mansions, bronzed bodies. Do you know what this represents? Bronzed bodies? Well, my body is not bronzed because I am very pale. I don't tan. So a bronzed body would be a tanned body. A tanned body, not mine, a tanned body. Bronzed bodies and vast ocean views. Vast means very large, very big. We use it to describe scenery mainly. The field is vast. The ocean, of course, you just see ocean as far as your eye can go, and vast ocean views. Bondi is the go-to suburb for international brands looking to launch down under. So what does that mean? Looking to launch down under? Well, remember I told you this represents Australian dollars, and this is an expression we use to describe Australia. It's down under, down under. So that represents in Australia. So Bondi is the name of a suburb. I did not know that before this lesson because I've never been to Australia. Have you been to Australia? So Bondi is the name of this suburb, and in Bondi, this is where you have the mansions on the cliffs, the bronzed bodies, tanned bodies, and vast, very large ocean views. I wrote down the notes that I've already covered. Now, I didn't talk about launch. So for international brands looking to launch means to establish or start a business. Now, they didn't specify to launch a business, to launch a bakery, to launch a cafe. It's just implied that it's a business because that's what you launch. You launch a new business. So it's to establish or start a business. And then remember, down under means in Australia. So international brands that are not located in Australia, that would be an international brand, to start a business in Australia. So Bondi, this very picturesque area, which they refer to as a suburb. A suburb is just a smaller area within a city because whatever city they're talking about here is probably a large area. So if you want to be more specific, there are many smaller areas called suburbs, and each suburb has a name. So the name of this suburb is Bondi. And Bondi is the go-to suburb. Here, do you know the adjective go-to? Native speakers love using this adjective. I recommend you use it as well. Bondi is the go-to suburb. It just means the preferred suburb. So hopefully you're thinking right now, JForrest English is my go-to channel to learn English. It's the one you prefer. You can think of it as it's the one I go to. It's the one I go to learn English. But remember, this is not a verb here. This is an adjective. JForrest English is my channel. Well, what type of channel? My go-to channel to learn English. If you agree with this, and I hope you do, put that's right in the comments.
Are you enjoying this lesson? If you are, then I want to tell you about the Finally Fluent Academy. This is my premium training program where we study native English speakers from TV, the movies, YouTube, and the news so you can improve your listening skills of fast English, expand your vocabulary with natural expressions, and learn advanced grammar easily. Plus, you'll have me as your personal coach. You can look in the description for the link to learn more, or you can go to my website and click on Finally Fluent Academy. Now let's continue with our lesson.
So when news broke on TikTok, if news breaks, it means that it is known for the first time. So the first time people hear about the issue. That's why maybe you've heard of news being described as breaking news. This is breaking news because they're sharing it for the first time. So when the news broke, when it became known, and where did it break? It broke on TikTok. And what news are they talking about? What news broke? became publicly known. When the news broke on TikTok that a Crumbl Cookie pop-up was coming to Sydney's iconic beachside hub, this is the news, that a Crumbl Cookie pop-up was coming to Sydney's iconic beachside hub. Okay, so first of all, have you ever heard of Crumbl Cookie? This is a brand in the US. It's called Crumbl Cookie. That's the name of the company. Now, do you know what a pop-up is? A Crumbl Cookie pop-up. A pop-up is a temporary store. Now, it can be in a physical structure. Sometimes it's in something that is more temporary, like a cart or a tent. So the actual structure can vary, but whether it's a physical structure or more of a tent, it's not going to be there permanently. So people will want to go to that pop-up, that store quickly because it might only be there for a week or 2 weeks. So a pop-up is a temporary store. They sell clothing, they sell any sort of housewares, they sell food, beverages, they can sell anything, but the store is temporary. So a Crumbl Cookie, this is the name of a company, a cookie company in the US, a Crumbl Cookie pop-up. So a temporary store, a temporary Crumbl Cookie store was coming to Sydney's iconic beachside hub. So what we heard before, this very beautiful description of this suburb called Bondi, that is Sydney's iconic beachside hub. So this represents Bondi. So let's summarize this. When the news became publicly known, when the news broke on TikTok, and the news was that this Crumbl Cookie pop-up temporary store was coming to Bondi, this iconic beachside hub in Sydney, few raised questions. It's very important distinction that it's not a few, that it's few, because there's a big difference between a few and few. Both few and a few mean not many, but they focus on different things. Few raised questions. This sounds positive because the focus is on lack. So it sounds like not many people raised questions, which is a positive thing. If people raise questions, it means, why is this happening? I don't know why this pop-up is coming. We don't need this pop-up. So the fact that there's a lack of people raising questions is a positive thing. If it said a few raised questions, this also means not many, but the focus is on some. So the focus is on, even though it wasn't a large number, still some people said, why is this happening? Why is this coming here? Do we need a pop-up? So by focusing on the lack of people raising questions, few, this is a positive thing. So both of them mean not many, but it changes whether it sounds positive or whether it sounds negative. Let's keep going. With a host of famous fans, the US-based bakery chain, which only sells domestically and in Canada, has secured a cult-like following. Okay, so the US-based bakery chain, what's the name of this company? Crumbl. Crumbl. That's what we're talking about, Crumbl. Crumbl is the US-based bakery chain that sells cookies. Now, they only sell domestically, which means in the US, in the location where you're talking about. If you're talking about an Australian store that sells domestically, that means it sells in Australia, right? So it depends on where that company is based. So they sell domestically in the United States and in Canada. So technically, they don't only sell domestically. They only sell to 2 locations, domestically and in Canada. Has secured a cult-like following. The word cult on its own has a very negative feel, but the description, the adjective cult-like, to describe a brand's following is used in a positive way. A cult-like following sounds like the people who follow this brand, who support this brand, are very devoted, are very dedicated. So has secured, this means has gained or obtained a very devoted fan base. That would be a cult-like following. And notice here we're talking about a fan base, and they say with a host of famous fans. So it means that within this cult-like following, this group of very devoted fans, some of them, many of them actually, because it says a host of. A host of means a large number of. So I should actually say many of the cult-like fans are famous. So hopefully by the end of this lesson, you say, wow, I learned a host of, a large number of, a host of new vocabulary. Notice vocabulary is always singular. If you wanted to use a singular plural word, you could replace it with words. I learned a host of new words, a large number of new words, or if you use vocabulary, it's always singular. I learned a host of new vocabulary in this lesson. Hopefully you say that by the end of this lesson. I think you will, because you've already learned a host of new words, and we're going to keep going. But when Australian foodies sunk their teeth into the treats. Okay, so remember, the treats are the cookies that they bought from the pop-up, the Crumbl Cookie pop-up, and they paid $17.50 for these cookies. Okay, so just remember all of that. So, but when Australian foodies sunk their teeth into the treats, outrage spread like wildfire. Okay, let's review this before we move on. But first of all, do you get a sense that this is positive or negative? It's always useful when you're reviewing something to understand the context, understand the emotion. Is this something positive or negative? Well, it's negative, because we have words like outrage, and this is something negative, and it spread like wildfire, which also has a very strong image in your mind. Do you know what a foodie is? It's very trendy right now to refer to yourself as a foodie. If you're a foodie, it means you have a keen interest in food, trying different food, trying to find the best food. So perhaps you would describe yourself as a foodie. I'm a foodie, or you could say, I'm not really a foodie. I just like basic food. But when Australian foodies sunk their teeth into, so you can think of it as just tried, and then the treats being the cookies they purchased. So sunk their teeth into, so tried or took a bite of, sunk their teeth into. The treats, the cookies, outrage. Outrage is anger, but anger and shock. So I'm outraged. That would be the adjective. Outrage is a noun, but as the adjective, you could say, I'm outraged. So if someone told me I had to pay $17.50 for a cookie, my first reaction would probably be outrage. I'm outraged. I'm a little bit angry and shocked that the cookie would be that expensive. Or maybe if you studied really hard for an exam and you got a bad score, you could be outraged because you're angry, but you're also shocked because you studied really hard. So I'm outraged. So outrage, the noun form, spread like wildfire. Well, of course, wildfire spreads very quickly. So that's what it means, is anger and shock. It spread quickly within the community. After it became clear they were eating days-old goods. So sometimes bakeries will sell day-old bread, for example, or day-old cookies, day-old pastries for a reduced price because they are a day old. they're 1 day old. So if I bought a day old cookie today, it means that the cookie was made yesterday. So what's that adjective we learned in the headline to describe food that isn't fresh, baked goods that aren't fresh? Stale. And here, notice they use days old. So that means it could be 2 or 3 or more. So it's even more than 1 day old. So remember, you can use that adjective stale. You could say outrage spread like wildfire after it became clear they were eating stale goods. And the goods represents cookies, stale cookies sold by a few. So notice here we have a few because it means a small number of enterprising locals. So enterprising means locals who have a sense for business. It's another way of saying people involved in business. So a few, maybe 3 or 4. So a small number of, not many. So maybe 3 or 4 locals, people who live in Australia but who are interested in business with no connection to Crumbl. So remember, they're selling stale Crumbl cookies in this pop-up, this temporary store, but there's no connection to Crumbl. So that's very important. Who had brought the cookies back in suitcases from Hawaii. Because remember, Crumbl doesn't sell in Australia. Crumbl only sells where? Domestically in the United States and in Canada. So Hawaii is in the United States. So these people, a few enterprising locals flew to Hawaii, bought the cookies and brought them back and sold them to people for $17.50, even though they were days old. And notice my pronunciation of Hawaii. You have Hawaii, Hawaii. You have that yi sound at the end. Hawaii, Hawaii. Let's continue. The saga unfolded after scores of people. You could replace scores of people with a host of people because it sounds like a large number of people spent the day snaking around. If you snake around, it means you move around, but it implies that there's a very long line. So there's a large number of people all moving, and then maybe they shift here. They go around a commercial block where this pop-up, the temporary store is, to secure, to get, to obtain their brightly colored signature Crumbl box. So the Crumbl box is a bright pink box. Adding insult to injury. If you add insult to injury, it means you add something bad, which is an insult, to something that's already bad, an injury. So you add an additional negative to something already negative. Adding insult to injury was the eye-watering price tag. So when you see the price of this cookie, your eyes literally water because you can't believe it. Maybe there's some outrage, some anger and shock. Remember, outrage. So the eye-watering price tag, it literally makes you cry. That would be eye-watering. Was the eye-watering price tag with consumers paying $17.50. Now here I would vocalize the dollars and cents because it's the noun phrase. When you pay an amount, it's a noun phrase. But when this describes something like the snack, it would be an adjective. So paying $17.50 in Australian dollars, which would represent 12 US dollars, which is still outrageous for a cookie, in my opinion, for the stale snack. So here again, they're using that adjective, stale snacks, which had aged inside the belly of a commercial airline. Because remember, Crumbl doesn't exist in Australia. These people went to Hawaii, purchased the cookies, brought them back and sold them days later. Let's continue. The doughy drama. So the drama of this situation and doughy because cookies are made from dough. The mixture of all the ingredients before they're cooked is called dough. So doughy, the article is trying to be clever to use a pun, a play on words by describing it as a doughy drama, has sparked. You know what this means, right? Has created, caused, resulted in debate online. Let's continue. Prompting calls. Now, actually, prompting has the same meaning here. It means resulting in, causing. I could also take spark and turn it into the ing and say sparking calls for legal action, resulting in, causing. I spelled this wrong here. Causing or sparking. But because they already use spark, they're not going to use it again in the same sentence. That's not a grammatical rule. It's just a stylistic choice. We tend to avoid using the same words in the same sentence, which is why it's so valuable to learn alternative ways of saying the same thing. Prompting calls, sparking calls for legal action to be taken against the sellers. The sellers being the people who are selling the cookies, who went to Hawaii, brought them back, and sold them days later, the sellers, as well as jabs against those willing to pay such an exorbitant amount simply to be pictured indulging in the latest trendy treat. Because remember, Crumbl has a very cult-like following, a very devoted fan base. These fans are so devoted, they would pay that amount willingly to secure, to get or obtain a Crumbl cookie. Now, do you know what jabs means? As well as jabs against those. Jab is a noun, and if you take a jab at someone, it means that you insult or criticize that person, but it's done in a more lighthearted or joking way. You're not being overly serious. So you're making a joke about someone, usually, but you don't mean to offend that person. You're just trying to be funny or lighthearted. So as well as jabs against those willing to pay such an exorbitant means much too large. So it doesn't just mean a high amount. It means too high, too large. So excessive, exorbitant amount. So if you take jabs at those people, you insult them for paying that much money for a cookie, but you're not trying to be mean. You're just trying to make a joke or be lighthearted. The founder of the US company, which US company? The founder of Crumbl, the US company. The founder of the US company quickly took to social media to clarify that the Australian pop-up, the temporary store selling these cookies, Crumbl cookies, was not affiliated with the company Crumbl. So this means the company wants everyone to know that they did not give the Australian pop-up permission to go to Hawaii and sell these for $17.50 days later. So not affiliated with means they have no connection to each other. It's unclear whether the Crumbl spin-off violated Australia consumer law or whether those affected would be the people who purchased the cookies. Those affected have grounds to act. Act means to take legal action or to take some sort of action against the company. But it's unclear. So it's another way of saying we don't know. It's unknown. It's unclear. But beyond a few, so a small number of cease and desist letter. If you received a cease and desist letter, it would be a letter officially saying you must stop whatever activity you're doing because it violates something. Beyond a few cease and desist letters, commentators think it's unlikely the US brand will take further action. So this sounds like the US brand being Crumbl probably sent or will send this Australian pop-up some letters saying, you must stop selling these cookies. We do not authorize this. And a few, maybe they'll send 3 or 4. But beyond that, meaning anything more than that, is unlikely. So they likely won't do anything but send a few cease and desist letters. And that's the end of our article. I hope you enjoyed learning about this issue. And more importantly, I hope you added a large number of new words or vocabulary to help you express your ideas. So now what I'll do is I'll read the article from start to finish, and this time you can focus on my pronunciation. How a stale $17.50 cookie sparked a social media storm. Set against a backdrop of cliffside mansions, bronzed bodies, and vast ocean views, Bondi is the go-to suburb for international brands looking to launch down under. So when news broke on TikTok that a Crumbl Cookie pop-up was coming to Sydney's iconic beachside hub, few raised questions. With a host of famous fans, the US-based bakery chain, which only sells domestically and in Canada, has secured a cult-like following. But when Australian foodies sunk their teeth into the treats, outrage spread like wildfire after it became clear they were eating days-old goods sold by a few enterprising locals with no connection to Crumbl, who had brought the cookies back in suitcases from Hawaii. The saga unfolded after scores of people spent the day snaking around a commercial block to secure their brightly colored signature Crumbl box. Adding insult to injury was the eye-watering price tag, with consumers paying $17.50 or $12 US for the stale snacks, which had aged inside the belly of a commercial airline. The doughy drama has sparked debate online, prompting calls for legal action to be taken against the sellers, as well as jabs against those willing to pay such an exorbitant amount simply to be pictured indulging in the latest trendy treat. The founder of the US company quickly took to social media to clarify that the Australian pop-up was not affiliated with the company Crumbl. It's unclear whether the Crumbl spin-off violated Australian consumer law or whether those affected have grounds to act. But beyond a few cease and desist letters, commentators think it's unlikely the US brand will take further action.
So did you like this lesson? Do you want me to make more lessons just like this? If you do, then put let's go, put let's go in the comments. And of course, make sure you like this lesson, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you're notified every time I post a new lesson. And you can get this free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. You can click here to download it or look for the link in the description. And you can keep expanding your vocabulary with this lesson. Make sure you watch it right now.